What's up everyone, Yuba Kumar here and welcome back to Boeing Boy. And today's video is gonna be all about Jeju Air. Now in this video I'm gonna be sharing with you all of the information that we have as of now about how and why the Jeju Air crash happened. This video is not intended to blame anyone, it's not intended to be an investigation report into what happened. It's just a statement of facts as to what all actually transpired, what all data do we have till now, and why exactly did so many people lose their lives and only 2 cabin crew survived. Let's get started. Now, the aircraft in question was a Boeing 737-800 aircraft, an aircraft that I have flown a lot. I have a lot of hours on that particular aircraft. The aircraft was operated by Jeju Airlines and it was doing a passenger aircraft and it was doing a passenger flight from Bangkok to Muan County in South Korea. The aircraft, as we all know by now, landed without the landing gear and without any flaps. And then the aircraft skidded down the runway and crashed into an embankment at the end of the runway. That embankment was made for the localizer antennas. As you can see here, these red things are there called localizer antennas. The crash was a really bad one. As a result, barely anything of the 737 was recognizable except the tail. And 2 cabin crew were the only people who survived in the crash. Rest, all the passengers and all the crew unfortunately perished. Let's check out whatever facts we have till date. So the 737-800 aircraft was carrying 175 passengers and 6 crew, total of 181 on board, out of which only 2 survived. 179 people unfortunately lost their lives. The whole flight from Bangkok till the time they entered final approach at Muan was absolutely normal. Nothing abnormal was reported. However, just before the aircraft landed, the ATC had reported a potential for bird strike. Now, Muan County, I did some research on it, and the whole airport is infested by a lot of birds. It is a place for migratory birds, and the ATC did issue a warning to the aircraft that a potential for a bird strike might exist. Now, there has also been this video floating around on social media. Apparently, this aircraft is the same one that crashed, and this is a few minutes before the crash, wherein it can be very clearly seen that something has entered the engines and as a result flames are coming out of the engine. Now this is mostly caused by bird ingestion at such altitudes. The birds enter the aircraft engines and they can cause damage to the compressor blades, which can result in something known as a compressor stall or a compressor surge. Now these flames coming out of the back of the engine are a clear sign of a compressor surge or stall. As you can see in the video, both engines 1 and 2, the left and the right engines, are both shooting flames. Now what we can probably conclude from this is that they did have a bird strike on the final approach. So about a minute after the bird strike warning, the pilots of the Jeju Air Flight declared an emergency. They declared a mayday and they initiated a go-around. Now this is a maneuver which I didn't really understand why they would do. I'm guessing they probably lost power on both engines, but then you wouldn't go around, so they should have had their engines working. So I don't really know, we'll know the outcome once the investigation report comes out. However, the pilots did initiate a go-around. As a part of the go-around maneuver on a 737, you're supposed to retract the landing gear and you're supposed to retract the flaps, which is what they apparently have done in this scenario. The aircraft, after doing the go-around, went ahead and requested the ATC to land on the opposite runway. So what they did was a 180-degree turn to land on the other side of the runway. Now this kind of maneuver being done by the pilots is indicative that they thought that an immediate landing was very necessary, because otherwise normally what we do is, if you do a go around, then you make a full circle and then you come back and land on the same runway. Wanting to land on the opposite runway is a clear indication of a severe emergency wherein the pilots decide that they have to put the aircraft on the ground as soon as possible. So the aircraft did a full 180-degree turn and then came back and landed on the opposite runway. Now in this landing, and as per the initial reports, the aircraft touched down at 1200 feet down the runway. So they took 1200 feet before they finally touched on the runway. The whole runway at Muan County is only 2800 meters. Now this is not the longest runway. And as a result of the late touchdown, they only had about 1600 meters of the runway to stop the aircraft. However, the major problem here was, one, obviously the lack of landing gear, consequently no brakes, and also the lack of flaps. Now without flaps on a Boeing 737, the speed at which you come and land is extremely high. Now there are non-normal checklists for this on the aircraft, which if you follow, you're landing at least about 100 to 150 kilometers per hour faster than your normal landing speed because you do not have flaps. And as can be seen clearly in the video, this particular aircraft was landing without flaps and without landing gear. Now this is a question that I have in my mind as a 737 pilot as to why were the flaps and the landing gear both not deployed. Because on the 737 we have redundancies. Even if your hydraulics fail after a bird strike or after engine failure, you always have a gravity gear extension. So you release the landing gear locks and the landing gear will just fall down because of gravity and air loads. However, that apparently did not work in this case. Also, for the flaps, we have an alternate mechanism wherein we use an electrical motor to power the flaps if in case the main hydraulics have failed. That also apparently was not used. Now we are not sure about the engines, if they were producing thrust or not. However, as can be seen in the video, engine number 2, the right hand engine, the thrust reverser is opened as the aircraft touches down. Now the thrust reverser opening obviously implies that the engine was producing thrust. Otherwise, it makes no sense to open the thrust reversers. So obviously, as you can see at this stage, we have more questions than answers, which is very obvious because the investigation is going on and we don't have the final report yet. However, it does appear that the pilots were in a lot of hurry to put the aircraft down on the ground, considering the 180-degree turn, the lack of manual gear extension or the lack of flap extension. Why were they in such a hurry is something that we don't really know yet. We'll probably find out soon. Now, after touching down on the runway, with the remaining 1600 meters of runway, the aircraft overran and as a result collided into this embankment that you see here. Now this appears to be like a structure of mud over which the localizer antennas have been placed, which is a very weird thing because at majority of the airports, the localizer antennas are usually placed over some sort of metal structure in which the aircraft can, even if it collides, does not really damage the aircraft. Now had this embankment not been there, the aircraft would have probably obviously been damaged, but so many lives would not have been lost. I'm not really sure why the airport decided to build on such a solid structure at the end of the runway because overruns do happen. And why would you have such a solid structure at the end is probably something we'll figure out later in the investigation. However, it was this embankment into which the aircraft just went head on at a very high speed, which resulted in obviously a lot of damages. Firefighters then obviously tried to save all the people. However, as per one of the reports, the whole aircraft was so mangled and so badly destroyed that only the tail section of the aircraft was the only recognizable part. The entire rest of the aircraft appears to have been just absolutely destroyed. Unfortunately, like I said, only 2 people survived the crash, rest everyone perished. A really sad accident that I believe could have been avoided or at least would have resulted in a lesser number of casualties had that embankment not be there. Further details, I'll make another video once the final investigation report is out. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you guys in the next one.